That's quite loud. That's quite loud. That's quite loud.
Yeah, temporary music. It's very loud music.
Maybe to stop it, I think.
Yeah, so I'd let people in.
I feel like I just heard the inner workings of my brain out loud. It was terrifying.
I don't know why. It's just something. It went super loud when the stream started. Also, Stacey, when you share, you can choose it just to share the PowerPoint, because when you flicked into Chrome to do the streaming, we could see that. There we go.
All right, everyone. I've just gone ahead.
Also, Stacey, when you share, you can choose it just to share the PowerPoint, because when you flicked into Chrome to do the streaming, we could see that.
Can you no longer see the PowerPoint?
We can see the PowerPoint, but you've also got the stream open in the background, so I can hear myself.
All right, everyone. I've just gone ahead.
Also, Stacey, when you share, you can choose it just to share the PowerPoint, because when you flicked into Chrome to do the streaming, we can see that.
Can you no longer see the PowerPoint?
We can see the PowerPoint, but you've also got the stream open in the background, so I can hear myself.
All right, everyone. I've just gone ahead.
Also, Stacey, when you share, you can choose.
There's something going on loop as well.
Stacey,
There's a weird echo.
You've got the stream open in one of your browser tabs for YouTube or whatever, and that's what we're hearing on repeat. You need to check Chrome for YouTube.
I'll put a message in the lobby just saying you're starting a few minutes late.
Yeah. You've got the stream open in one of your browser tabs for YouTube or whatever, and that's what we're hearing on repeat. You need to check Chrome for YouTube.
I'll put a message saying you're starting a few minutes late.
Yeah. You've got the stream open in one of your browser tabs for YouTube or whatever, and that's what we're hearing on repeat. Right.
This live stream's killing us. This was the problem yesterday.
Yeah, so I'm guessing
over the weekend.
I'm guessing Stacey's got open in a tab and just can't find it.
Yeah, she's got so much going on.
Yeah.
If it's LinkedIn, it's a real challenge. I hope.
Okay. Are we straight? Let's service. I mean, so what I can do, I have a button to mute her computer, but I don't know if it mutes it for everyone or just to put me. Because obviously I don't think there's any sound in the presentation, so we can just mute the.
One option is they are automatically recorded, so if possible, maybe you have to just go without the live stream, but it's not.
Can any of you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So, which service are we streaming to for this session, Stacey?
Okay.
One option is they are automatically recorded, so if possible, the echo.
I've gone ahead and I've stopped the live streaming.
Still got an echo there.
I have no tabs open.
You've got.
I have no tabs open.
Is there anything you got open? Zoom.
I've gone ahead and I've stopped the live streaming.
Are you guys? You'll be on mute the whole time while you're producing, Stacey, right? So we won't hear all of this. Maybe we just go ahead without the live stream.
Can you share your screen again and just share? When it asks you to share, you can share to just share a program and just share PowerPoint.
Guys, you'll be on mute the whole time while you're producing, Stacey, right? So we won't hear all of this. Maybe we just go.
There's nothing. I can hear you, Stacey. I can hear you talk. If you can you hear us?
Guys, you'll be on mute the whole time while you're producing, Stacey, right?
Something's gone really wrong. I don't think. Can you hear us? I'm gonna. Something's gone really wrong. I don't think. Can you hear us? Right, I've muted Stacey's screen. Has that muted it for everyone?
No,
Right. Okay. I'm gonna.
I've muted her, but I can still hear
Something's gone
that.
really wrong. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, Sam,
Right,
but
I've
I
muted
can also hear
Stacey's
the
screen.
echo.
Muted it for everyone.
No,
Right.
is the
I'm
echo
gonna-
coming from you, Sam?
No.
Muted
I
her.
have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you just
You, Sam,
just sharing PowerPoint.
no. Is the echo coming from you, Sam?
No,
Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you
You, Sam,
just sharing PowerPoint.
no. Is the echo coming from you, Sam?
No,
Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you
You, Sam,
just sharing PowerPoint.
no. Is the echo coming from you, Sam?
No,
Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you
You, Sam,
just sharing PowerPoint.
no. Coming from you, Sam?
No,
Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you just sharing PowerPoint.
Coming from you, Sam?
No,
Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you these Facebook tabs. That's what we're streaming to.
Coming from you, Sam? Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you these Facebook tabs. That's what we're streaming to.
Coming from you, Sam? Muted her.
I have no audio coming out of my stuff. Stacey, you these Facebook tabs. That's what we're streaming to.
Oh, what on earth did you do?
I,
Should I let Julie all sorted? I just messaged Julie, but if you're all sorted.
I think Stacey's has issues because she's saying she can't unmute herself. I have asked her to unmute.
Julie's now troubleshooting with us. We're now
It's
10 minutes.
gone.
Okay, let's just begin without any
We will
live
go
stream. I
because
think
there's
it's
no live
better. We'll
stream.
still have a recording of the session.
And it's back now.
Julie's now troubleshooting with us. Oh, the echo's back.
Echo has to be coming from. One sec, let me mute me and make sure it isn't me. It's back now.
Wait, no one's talking, right? Everyone,
Julie's now troubleshooting with us. Oh, the echo's back.
but it's still doing the thing. Okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave. I saw the message. I'm going to leave. Hand over host rights to Sam, and I'll come back. It's still doing the thing. Okay, I'm going to
Can you see me? Yes, that's fine. Oh, Jerry is now the host. Jerry,
Oh,
Jerry,
Right.
can you click the three dots on my name and make host, please?
sure.
Thank you very much. Let me just.
Oops.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you just hover over my name and click the three dots in the blue, like if you were to pin me, and then there should be an option to make host. There we go. Thank you very much. Right, let me. All right. I need. Right, there we go. Yes, I thought. Yeah, it was Facebook. I think it was Facebook. Right. I think we'll. Right. There we go. She's stuck in waiting room limbo.
Is it possible for you to start without her and I do some of the
I-
chat box messages? Try.
I don't have the slides or anything. That's the problem.
Okay, okay.
Stacey, right. We have you back, Stacey. She's coming to audio. Right. Ask to unmute. Hello, Stacey.
Hello, everyone.
Right. Let me.
If ever anything was going to ever make me look incompetent, it was this moment. Oh,
Not
my
you, it's the tech,
gosh.
don't worry.
That's fine. It was. Was it Facebook?
I've closed it and I am blood red. You might not be able to see it. I am. Okay, so I have found Zoom. We are live on YouTube, everyone. I saw it. I don't know if anybody else can see.
They may have. I hope.
Everybody's looking at the Zoom. I can see us right now. So we're live and I am going to go ahead and start sharing screen right now.
We need to start the recording again as well.
Like that.
You're good.
Can everybody see that? Is that good?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to start recording as well.
All right.
Record to cloud.
I can't see the waiting room.
I can. Can I go ahead and let everybody in?
Can you make sure I'm co-host? Because I
Yes.
think I lost it when I made you host.
Sure. Coming up, Sam.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, everyone. We have people starting to join us. Thank you so much for your patience. We really appreciate it. We have people joining. We are short on time. We do apologize. We'll give it another minute just as we wait for everybody to join. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Stacey Lee. I am your lead producer for today. Welcome to today's session. I'm going to go ahead and kick off just in the interest of time. We have our slide up over here. I am just going to talk us through some housekeeping notes over here, please. This is some of the same sessions as the meetings, and at this year, sorry, meetings have child and youth speakers. I'm going to try and go through it as quickly as possible in the interest of time. Forgive me if I am rushing through it. We have closed captioning. To enable closed captioning, simply click on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom console, and you can select the language that you wish to caption to be transcribed in. Interpretation is not available for this session, so neither of you have to worry about that. This session will be recorded. Please take note of that, and you will be able to watch the session should you need to come back to it at any point. We'd love for everyone to please keep their videos and cameras on if you have the bandwidth for it, just to allow for a lot of interaction, and we'd love to see your faces in the session. We do ask that you remain muted, please, just so that we don't have any interruptions when we have a speaker on. And if you have any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out to myself, Stacey Lee, or to Sam as the second producer. Easy to find us. It's just 1_ and you will find us as the producers, and 3_ will be to find your facilitators and speakers. Having said that, once again, I apologize for rushing through it. We are going to move on to the next slide, which is the code of engagement. Please be professional and work together, respect each other and respect confidentiality. Listen actively, be open to meeting new people, step up and step back. Be mindful of the environment you bring with you. If you can feel and you feel uncomfortable, turn your camera on. Mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Be conscious of your surroundings and stay present. Last slide that I need to introduce to you all is the breakout slide, how to move yourself around in and around breakout rooms in Zoom. We are going to open up 3 breakout rooms, and you have the option of choosing the breakout room that you would like to go to. Number 1, how to move yourself. Click breakout rooms in your Zoom meeting controls, which you should find at the bottom of your screen. Depending on the device that you have joined on, you might have joined on a phone, it might be somewhere else where you may have some difficulties, let us know. This displays the list of open breakout rooms created by the host. Hover your pointer over the number to the right of the breakout room you wish to join. Click join and then confirm by clicking join. Repeat as necessary to join other breakout rooms or click leave room to return to the main session. Everyone have fun with your session. I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Kath.
Thank you so much, Stacey. And hi, everyone. So great to see so many of you here this morning. Welcome to session 6 on protecting children across borders. Thank you very much for taking the time. So this session has been organised jointly by the Case Management Task Force and the Unaccompanied and Separated Children Task Force of the Alliance. So my name is Catherine Williamson. I'm Head of Humanitarian Child Protection for Save the Children, and I co-lead the Case Management Task Force. And my co-facilitator here today is from the Unaccompanied and Separated Children's Task Force. This is Jerry Abdallah, who's the IRC Child Protection Technical Advisor. So why are we focusing on this issue? This is because of the scale of the issue, of the problem, the severity of the risks to children, and the complexity involved in responding to address those risks. I can't see the slides we're on, actually. I assume you can see a slide with that's it, fantastic. So in 2022, UNHCR estimated that the number of people forcibly displaced across from their homes exceeded 100 million for the first time. 32 million of these people were displaced across borders, and approximately 41% of those people were children. So we can extrapolate, we don't know the exact numbers of children, but we can extrapolate that there were in excess of 11 million children who had been forcibly displaced across borders by mid-2022. And I can imagine that those numbers have only increased. If we go to the next slide. Of the 32 million people displaced across borders, 72% were from just 5 countries. These countries are Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. And if we go to the next slide. And the top 5 hosting countries were Turkey, Colombia, Germany, Pakistan, and Uganda. And as you can see visually, those are often the neighboring countries of countries in crisis. So of the approximately 11 million children, an unknown minority are traveling alone or with adults who are not their primary caregivers. And if we go to the next slide, these children are at a heightened risk of a number of critical protection concerns, including exploitation, trafficking, detention, refoulement, and forcible return. Many children lack legal documentation. Some present themselves as adults in order to avoid detection by authorities. Others are unable to prove that they are children and are treated as adults by border authorities, leading to a denial of their right to special protection. And if we click one more time. Despite the heightened risks, this is a particularly difficult population of children to protect. Some of the reasons for this are, firstly, practical, the challenge of identifying children. So as mentioned, many children are actively avoiding contact with authorities or those services that may refer them to authorities. How do we best protect those children who don't want to be identified? Other children are hidden from contact by those who may be trafficking them for exploitation. The challenges are also principled, ethical, the challenge of determining what's in their best interest. So once identified, is it in a child's best interest to always refer them to child protection authorities when this risks their disappearance, or to work with them to help them minimize risk in the choices they make? If the former, how do we ensure that they can trust the system if they're resistant to entering it? And if the latter, how do we manage legal compliance in the country of jurisdiction? The challenge is also legal, of navigating different legal jurisdictions and upholding international legal obligations. So as children move across borders, they move from one legal jurisdiction to another, with implications for which duty bearers have the primary responsibility for their protection, both in national and international law, including refugee law. Moving from one jurisdiction to another also affects the movement of children's data across borders, and that undermines the ability to provide cross-border case management, and also complicates the tracking of children during population movements. And finally, of course, all of these challenges are situated within an ever-evolving geopolitical discourse, increasing humanitarian needs driven by the concurrent crises of conflict, climate change and economic and political instability drive an increase in migration. And those migrants become the focus of polemic that places them as the cause rather than the consequence of instability, with significant implications for the political and populist will to uphold child rights. So we have significant learning from protecting children across borders, and we have tools and guidance as well. But these challenges remain, and they're really complex, and it requires us to put our heads together to consider what more needs to be done. So if we can move on to the next slide. So the objective of the session today is to explore the issue, build consensus on a need to act, and define next steps for strengthening the protection of children across borders. But clearly 90 minutes isn't long enough to arrive at a roadmap, but if possible, we'd like to broadly define what should happen and consider what opportunities may exist to take this forward. So to do this, the session consists of 2 country regional presentations, a brief statement of mandates in international law, some group work based around scenarios and feedback in plenary, and then a brief consensus building on next steps. So without further ado, if we go to the next slide, I'd like to introduce you to our 2 speakers. First of all, we have Justine Abenetwe, the Senior Child Protection Advisor from Save the Children, who'll be speaking about protecting children across borders out of Ukraine. And then we have Dr. Martha Bragan, representing the International Association of Schools of Social Work, who'll be speaking about children crossing the southern border into the USA. So over to Justine.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Justine Abenetwe. I'm a child protection advisor with Save the Children, and I'm going to be speaking about children moving across borders affected by the Ukraine conflict. Beginning of February or last year, 2022, to date, almost 7.5 million children have been displaced and are victims of the largest human displacement crisis in the world today. And this is from the explosives and attacks in the populated urban areas and residential areas within and across Ukraine. Children and their families have taken refuge in neighboring countries, fled to other parts of Ukraine that are relatively safer, or are trapped in escalating hostilities. We see very many children still stuck where the attacks are happening. Approximately 5 million children are displaced inside and outside of Ukraine. Nearly 100,000 children were living in institutions and boarding facilities prior to the conflict, and almost half of those children were living with disabilities. This is a very high number of children compared to other countries across, and this has a lot of meaning and impact on children, especially when we have lost so much control because of the escalated conflict. Next slide, please. The challenges the children are facing: there is limited or no access to services, both on transit and in country of asylum. For children that have already settled into Poland, we did a survey about a month ago, and 17% have access to they're the only children that have access to psychological and sports activities and logistical related, and this is because of logistical related challenges. Most of them suffer long journeys. If you look at the map of Ukraine, maybe later you realize that the frontline conflict is happening in the east part of the country, and for children to access safety or the next borders, they will have to move 2-day, 3-day long distances from the east to the west, where they can access Poland, they can access Romania, they can access other countries through Poland and or Romania. So the distances in which they have to take to access safety are very long, and along the way they don't have access to services. Where they go in the countries where they settle or choose as countries of asylum, they suffer issues of language barrier, limiting them to access services and fully integrating into the community that is hosting them. We also see separation of children from caregivers. Most of the children travel alone or with adults that were not their primary caregivers. And then with that, they then avoid contact with border authorities. So they use porous borders to enter those countries. And or sometimes, which we have seen a lot with the Ukraine crisis, is that children that were in institutions, as earlier mentioned, they travel within the institution that they were in, and they are not documented. For example, they will not have individual case files for these children, and they will cross the border as an institution. And we have seen that, for example, Ukraine government declaring that they still hold responsibility of the children in institutions or the institutions. So the countries that are hosting these institutions do not then take responsibility or enter these children into their child protection system. And this affects how stakeholders or service providers are able to identify individual children protection concerns, and this becomes a challenge to be able to even provide individual or services, and that then increases the risk of children being trafficked and getting involved in illegal activities. Next slide, please. We also see children crossing from in institutions are often or not individually documented, and the institutions have limited resources to support the children's system. And the fact that they are not integrating into the protection system, the expectation is that then the Ukraine government or the Ukraine authorities continue to provide services for the children across the border in their institutions, which is not possible, or which is not happening because there's limited resources now allocated to social protection, since the country is under war and they have they are prioritizing their resources to other needs, including military resources that they require to continue to protect the country. We also see children that initially cross the border on unarranged care with either neighbors or extended relatives, and so do not register as separated. So when they get into the country, they haven't registered as separated. They have not registered through the child protection system. Then eventually the caregivers that had taken them on find it difficult to continue to support the children. They can't meet their needs, and then they abandon the children, and then the children have to go back to the system to seek for asylum. And we have seen this, leaving many children without care and at very high risk. And with the Eastern Europe, the high risk of trafficking that is facing children, especially teenagers. We also see the legal frameworks related to protection of children and legal responsibility for unaccompanied and separated
Sorry
children.
I'll share the slide with you. You'll be taking the head. Talking
sorry?
about child by children in Ukraine, especially those in the border. You can take that as a model one or model.
Can we remind everyone to mute themselves? Thank you.
Participants, please may I remind you, you were muted upon entry. Please do not speak while the speaker is speaking. Save any questions and remarks for afterwards, please.
Okay, thank you. Going back, the legal framework related to the protection of children and legal responsibility for unaccompanied and separated children in residential or foster care. In Poland, the responsibility still remains with Ukraine, and Ukraine is not in position to continue providing or supporting and monitoring the institutions, and that leaves children with very high needs. And looking at the recent, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Ukraine local authorities calling back the institutions to go back to Ukraine, yet where they were inviting them back to is not safe. There were no BIDs that were conducted for children, individual children, and some children were at very high risk, especially children that were living with very critical disabilities. There's a limited or lack of legal documentation to allow children access services, especially education, health, and this is usually because either children entered as an institution, and that means there was no registration for children individually, but also children that entered through the porous borders and never registered with authorities, and all they came with caregivers, and later the caregivers abandoned them, and they didn't have legal documentation to be able to access services. Next slide, please. Yeah, then we have a situation for children that's, and can we go to the next slide, please, Stacy? Yeah, we go to the recommendations. Recommendations, what can we do to improve the situation or be able to respond to the situation? We talk about coordination. The response would benefit from strengthened coordination between government partners, stakeholders to provide timely and quality services. In some of the countries, the coordination is very strong and robust on specific thematics, but in other thematics, you realize that the coordination is so strong. So, for example, on repatriation of children in institutions, providing services for children in institutions, that would really benefit, coordination would really benefit in ensuring that children receive timely and quality services. The big word for deinstitutionalization within the response is very key, ensuring that children get out of the institutions, they get alternative care, family-based care through case management in Ukraine and the receiving countries. For countries that have received children in institutions, can we see a possibility where we get children out, attach them to foster carers, or even reunite them with their biological families, and then provide case management through family-based care or any other alternative care. Then integrating children into national systems remains a key priority. For example, where children even if they have moved through an institutions, can we ensure that they are integrated within the child protection system of the host country? And so children can be properly documented, properly integrated within the system, which will enable monitoring, service provision, and ensure that risks are reduced. Then we also look at providing contextually relevant services, for example, childcare services to enable caregivers and parents have time to work and provide basic needs for their children. When you look at some of the countries where the children have gone, in fact, part of the survey that happened was that parents are willing, or caregivers are willing to be able to provide for themselves to support the children, but and not just depend on either the meager resources that are provided by the system or even by the humanitarians. They can be able to work and contribute to the economy of that country, but also be able to provide for their children. But they are limited by the childcare support. They probably as you could be aware that children that are moving, it's only children and women that are moving. So you'll find very many single-headed households, and they do not have an alternative for anyone to remain home and care for the children. So if we can be able to contextualize and have childcare services that can provide a bit of help, and then the parents can fend for the children. Then support families and caregivers with income generating activities, in addition to supporting children to access education, especially in-person classes, as the feedback from the children has come through that they want to have that interaction with other children, but also this would support integration of these children within the communities where they have sought asylum, and then be able to access co-curricular activities and psychosocial support. There is also an element of children who cross the borders and not be able to register because the first country they have entered in is not the country they desire to settle for asylum. If that can also be sorted out through proper coordination with amongst the stakeholders. Thank you so much. Over to you, Kat.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much, Justine. If we move over to Martha Bragan now to present on unaccompanied separated children at the US southern border.
Thank you so much, Kat, and thank you all for taking the time on this. So that more than 152,000 unaccompanied or separated children were placed in US custody at the southern border in 2022. Some of them, most of them, came unaccompanied, fleeing for their lives, 72% of these between the age of 14 and 17. Others, especially younger children, were accompanied by non-legal guardians, such as grandparents, adult siblings, extended family, community members, or paid caregivers, and separated at the border with the adults turned away, incarcerated, or deported. 93% of these unaccompanied or separated children came from Mexico and the Northern Triangle of Central America, 7% from all other countries. The distance, I should say, from the Northern Triangle or Southern Mexico takes at least 1 week and often several weeks, up to a month, month and a half, to travel, and most of them are traveling on foot. Of those from Central America, 87% had a parent living in the US who had been sending remittances and could have taken up care with assistance. The remainder were in contact with relatives or community members who were known to them. Yet recent reports find children dying in US custody, sometimes by suicide, being sent back to danger, or engaged in hazardous labor as they are rushed quickly out of dangerous situations in custody to a person who is not their parent or relative, but someone who may be a trafficker claiming, giving a better case for the claiming of sponsorship. Sponsorship in the US requires complete financial responsibility for the child. Next slide, please. Why are they coming? Cold War politics led to proxy conflicts in El Salvador and Guatemala. An accompanying genocide in Guatemala forced the indigenous majority off their lands and limited the area where they could grow crops. Development constraints and austerity also forced farmers off their lands in Honduras. Climate change also affected the ability of poor communities to support themselves. Unaccompanied and separated children fleeing Central America during these conflicts were not given refugee status and jailed in the US, where they encountered and had to survive carceral and violence. When these children completed their sentences, they were deported to Central America, often attracting drug cartels in their own countries. 10% of the combined population of these countries, whoops, oh my goodness, sorry. 10% of the combined population of these countries were living in the United States as of 2019, and global remittance flows made up roughly 1/5 to 1/4 of each country's GDP in 2021. Development-driven displacement accompanied by climate change in Mexico has also led to a dangerous rate of murder there, both generalized homicide and femicide in the city. It has been customary in earlier times for people from the Americas to come back and forth to the US, but a 1968 law helping those fleeing communism to enter the US legally also limited the number of migrants from the Americas for the first time. Those limits remain in place, forcing this new flow of refugees. Next slide. Sorry, next slide.
Martha, I did go into the next slide. Do you want me to go past this slide as well?
No, I'm just not seeing it. I don't know why. I've got it now.
Okay.
What happens when the unaccompanied or separated or children who've been recently separated arrive? Children are apprehended by officials at the U.S. Border Patrol or Office of Field Operations, both agencies of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and placed in Customs and Border Protection facilities. The Customs and Border Protection officers detain the children in facilities while authorities determine whether they qualify as unaccompanied children. Some unaccompanied children are separated from adult guardians who are unrelated or from family members who are arrested for illegal crossing. And I was recently called to the courts to testify that it was customary for grandparents to take care of or accompany grandchildren when the parent had become ill or died. I don't know why this was considered strange. Under US law, some unaccompanied children from Canada and Mexico can be deported immediately. Immigration and Customs Enforcement manages the transfer of unaccompanied and separated children to the Department of Health and Human Services. The Office of Refugee Settlement, a department of HHS, can hold children in temporary influx facilities during emergencies, but it is supposed to arrange long-term shelter as soon as possible. U.S. Citizen and Immigration Services rules on asylum cases, and the Justice Department rules on immigration cases. So what happens is that these organizations for refugee resettlement can't really do their work properly while the children are in these detention facilities. Instead, Health and Human Services works to do extensive background checks and home study to determine if children can be cared for by parents or other family members who are legal sponsors while they await asylum. If they clear background checks, they can be sent to their family or communities. However, most can't clear those background checks quickly because they're being done at very long distances. The children are kept near the border. Family members are often scattered around the country. So those who don't clear the background checks, which is the majority, remain in custody or are released to unverified sponsors due to staff shortages and the difficulty of doing home studies at distances by telephone with sponsors who fear deportation. Court cases continue. Children are eventually denied or deported, granted asylum and can stay, or become adults or move to adult detention facilities. Next slide, please. Oops, again, I'm sorry, I can't see. So hopefully you're seeing my recommendations. There are really practical alternatives to this very painful and difficult situation for children. Of course, all recommendations should be made in consultation with local organizations of the asylum-seeking families and communities of the children and the young people themselves. Further, if we overhaul the asylum conventions beyond 1951 to adapt to the needs of today's forced migrants, for instance, considering the Cartagena Principles of 1984 that expand the definition of refugees to those fleeing violence and disorder, such as that experienced in many countries around the world that are not beyond the question of whether or not a person is individually persecuted for membership in a special group. That would make a big difference for the status of most of these children and families. Allow families to claim asylum together. Don't deport accompanying relatives, especially if they have paperwork that describes their relationship to the child. Provide adult caregivers or sponsors with work authorization. In the US specifically, where the US has a labor shortage, so that parents and legal guardians can support children legally, avoiding the need for illegal child labor. I remind you that in the US, if you are not a US citizen or permanent resident or work authorization holder, you are not entitled, even as a legal migrant, to receive government benefits of any kind, including those for children. Change the well-meant requirements for interim care from least restrictive environment to require immediate supported placement with parents and relatives wishing to care for the child. That would put them under the jurisdiction of local child protection authorities that are in a much better position to care for the children, make sure the home situation is safe, and that the purported parents are not traffickers, and that the children are enrolled in school and given reintegration facilities, as what is required for refugee resettlement, a care that is not currently being extended to these children. Thank you very much for your time and for listening.
Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you, Justine, as well, for those fascinating presentations. We're going to go into group work soon, based around 3 scenarios. But before we do, this is an area, this is a protection issue that has a number of mandates based in international law. And I wanted to invite each of these agencies to just speak for a minute about what their mandate is in relation to protecting children across borders. So first of all, can I ask Nazli Sanier to explain the role of ICRC?
Hello, good morning, everyone. This is Marta Trigiano. I'm Migration Advisor at the ICRC. I'm here indeed with my colleague Nazli. She's advisor on the protection of family links. The ICRC, as you probably already know, has a mandate to protect and assist people affected by armed conflict and other situations of violence. When it comes to the protection of children across border, in particular migrant children, the ICRC mandate and migration intersect in the sense that the ICRC in particular protects and assists migrants that are caught in armed conflict or that are at risk to be returned to armed conflict, and separated missing and deceased migrants, as this is part of the wider mission, role and mandate of the Central Tracing Agency, which is embedded within the ICRC. Children are definitely a particular vulnerable group in the sense that they may be particularly exposed to certain protection risks, including when they are migrants, to the risk of being separated, going missing, or dying in country of transit or destination, including at borders. So in particular, in this sense, the ICRC operationally engages in different types of activities for migrant children to prevent the risk of being separated, going missing, for the search. So for example, tracing, sometimes to support also the authorities for the identification of human remains, in certain circumstances for the reunification of unaccompanied children, and then also to support the families of separated and the missing in particular. So this is in a nutshell how our mandate intersect with migration, and what do we do for migrant children across borders. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. And can I ask Séverine Lacroix to explain the role of IOM?
Catherine, I don't see that Séverine has joined us. Now that I look, I don't see any participants here, unless one of his colleagues or her colleagues might have joined us, but no Séverine.
Okay, is there anyone from IOM? Okay, don't worry. Maybe can I ask Laurent Chapuis to explain the role of UNICEF?
Thank you, Catherine. And thanks to the great presenters just before. In a nutshell, UNICEF's role in that area of work very much based on the COC, acknowledging national authorities' role as duty bearers for all children, whether national children, refugees, migrants, displaced children. So we see very much our role as supporting national authorities so that they can deliver against their responsibilities in that regard. That means that we will particularly focus on their ability, national authorities, civil society ability to support with best interest assessment of the children, especially when unaccompanied separated children crossing the border. This means investing in family tracing and reunification capacity at country level, in parallel with alternative care modalities, while reunification options are being pursued for those children. What do we mean by alternative care? Very often it means promoting family and community-based care. In some countries, those modalities are already in place. In some countries, they have to be started from scratch. Very often in a pilot manner, but also in parallel with efforts to reform legislation, so that gradually national legislation does provide for this type of care and for this type of care to become inclusive of refugee and migrant children. Linked with this, we prioritize investment in the national social workforce, meaning social workers, para-social workers, equipping them with skills and knowledge so that they can conduct those best interest assessment through a case management approach. I'm going to stop here because I think that's the gist of UNICEF's work in this respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. And finally, can I ask Jessica Stewart-Clark to just briefly share the mandate of UNHCR in protecting children across borders?
Sure, Kath, thank you. I mean, I'm never brief, but I'll do my utmost. UNHCR's mandate is derived from the 1950, the statutes established and set out by the General Assembly in 1950. So we have a legal mandate to be providing international protection to refugees. And this is really in the sense of providing protection as well as seeking permanent solutions. Since 1950, this has really been expanded from refugees to also include stateless persons, asylum seekers, and returnees. So in order for us to uphold the legal mandate, we work with national asylum systems and child protection systems to ensure refugee and asylum seeking children, as well as stateless children and returnees, can access and receive appropriate child protection services and durable solutions. And those durable solutions could include, for example, local integration in the country of asylum. It could include voluntary repatriation to the country of origin if it is safe and truly voluntary, as well as, of course, resettlement, which unfortunately really is a durable solution for about 0.01% of the refugee population worldwide. There are also additionally complementary pathways, but the critical component of this from the child protection perspective is UNHCR's framework for child protection, which is the best interest procedure. So wherever national systems are unable or unwilling, UNHCR implements best interest procedure, also commonly known as BIP. And this is really for refugee and asylum seeking children to ensure that we are able to provide support and assistance in their best interests, and particularly to help in ensuring that decision making for forcibly displaced children is done in a way with strict procedural safeguards. It is designed around addressing the risks for children and promoting durable solutions as those that I mentioned, in accordance with the framework as set out in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that's particularly within comment number 14. Lastly, just to say that the best interest principle is absolutely integral to the work that UNHCR does underneath our mandate for international protection for refugees and for others of concern to UNHCR, as well as within the implementation of best interest procedure. We use best interest procedures, particularly when it relates to children at heightened risk, such as unaccompanied children and for separated children in exceptional circumstances. And we use this to undertake family tracing, family reunification, establishing alternative care. And it follows very much the same steps as the interagency child protection case management guidance, but it does incorporate these specific and strict procedural safeguards, such as best interest determination, for example. And this is really articulated within the Convention on the Rights of the Child in comments number 6 and number 14. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. That's great. If we move to the next slide, I'll hand over to Jerry to introduce the group work.
Thank you, Kat, and thanks everyone. Now we are going to also hear from you, and we will be assigned randomly into 3 breakout rooms. And each breakout room will have a case scenario One will be focusing on mandatory reporting scenario, and the other one will be focusing on cross-border family reunification. And the last one will be focusing on legal accountability for children in institutional care. So each group will be focusing on these 4 questions regarding the scenario, and after hearing about the 2 presentations that we went through, and the mission of different agencies and organizations, you'll be looking at actions needed to be taken to the most effectively protect. To most effectively protect the children. The second question is more about the responsibility. Who are the key actors for these actions? And the last 2 questions will be more focusing on the obstacle that you might encounter vis-a-vis the scenario that will be given, and who or what can be done to overcome these obstacles. Who need to be involved into resolving the challenges. So we will be now standing to different breakout rooms, and we'll have around 20 minutes. Due to time constraint, we will just have 15 minutes for the work in the breakout room, and then we'll come back in the plenary to share key information on key aspect of what will come out of the breakout room. So,
Thank you, Jerry. Are we ready to go ahead? Can I go ahead and open the breakout rooms?
yes, please.
Sure, I will go ahead and open the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms. No. Let me redo that.
So while you're doing that, just to say that for each breakout room, we'll have 1 person who will be leading: Kat, Jerry, and Laurie.
Yes. Breakout rooms have been open for 15 minutes. If you do remember, everyone, the slide in the beginning did allow some instructions to choose a room. As you can see, there are 3 rooms that have been opened up. All you've got to do is select the room that you would like to join. Number 1, mandatory reporting. Number 2, cross-border. Number 3, legal. If you have some issues, let us know in the chat and we can assign you to groups. Otherwise, please feel free to select your group and join.
Hello team, which group are you to join?
You can join which of the breakout rooms you would prefer based on the subject that is closest to your interests. So we have mandatory reporting scenario with Justine and Lauren, cross-border family with Jerry, and legal accountability with Catherine.
Yeah, I want to join the cross-border team.
Cross-border action, is that the one?
Cross-border family reunification.
Yeah, there we go. I think I can put you in that. Is there anyone else having issues accessing a breakout room and would like to be put in a specific one? Please put a message in chat and I can assign you to that room.
Anna's asked a query in the chat. You just, it should pop up for you. If not, go to the bottom of your Zoom console and you can see breakout rooms if you click more at the right. And you should be able to choose for yourself.
That's good.
Producers, do you want me to stay here or should I join a group for my own enjoyment?
Completely up to you, Camilla.
Okay.
Go ahead and join the room.
I'll head over.
Sure.
I'm just going to put a slightly different message in. There we go. If you are having issues joining a breakout room, do put a message in chat and we will put you in the correct room. Thank you. For those not participating in breakout room activities, the session will resume in about 3 minutes.
Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had a lovely breakout. I think we've got everyone back. I am just looking to see. Let me take a look. Do we have Kathy? Yes, Lauren is here. Welcome back. So what we're going to do now, everyone, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. So we're pretty much at the end of our session. Kath and Lauren, if you're welcome to stop me. We're at the end of our session, and what we're going to do now, we're going to ask our second producer, Sam, to please share in the chat our closing Menti polls. Kindly go ahead and fill those.
Stacey, do we not have feedback from, I think we have feedback from each group first.
Let me.
So just 15 minutes.
Yes. There we go. Thank you, Kat. Sorry, nobody came onto camera, so I was like, oh, okay, it's me. Thank you, Jerry. I was wondering when you'd pop up. Can I go ahead and spotlight you?
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about that, Kath. Sorry about that, Jerry. Thank you so much, everyone.
And we need to go back one slide, I'd say.
Yeah, good. All right. So we are going to take like, 6 minutes 2 minutes for each group to share some key information in terms of feedback on what comes up. I will start with our group. We were discussing more about the family separation due to a conflict, but involving cross-border situation. And on question 1 about the actions that needed to be taken, it was obvious that we should focus on doing the assessment, both for the children as well as the family who, during the tracing process. There is also to think about the best interest of the child, looking at the wishes of the children. And other action is also to make sure that we have a good registration data that is well informed, and also think about the best interest determination when it comes to think about the reunification of the child as well. And in terms of who to be involved, obviously to involve caseworkers who are technically trained to do that work, but to keep in mind that in cross-border situation or in such requests, we need to think about the state that is the main actor to be really involved into the process. We have also UNHCR, who has that mandate for refugees, UNICEF, as well as we have been listening from what they have presented, ICRC, who has the mandate of cross-border reunification, and IOM also as well, who can be also involved into that. In terms of obstacle, some key obstacle that came up, we have documentation. That is one of the obstacles. That obstacle is about the global environment while doing the assessment in terms of security on the side of the parents, the security, the cooperation of the family might be also an obstacle, and who now to involve in order to face this obstacle, what can be done to overcome this obstacle is ICRC is one of the main agents who is involved into the cross-border, and they can also work in providing capacity for emergency legal paper to facilitate the reunification if needed. They can facilitate, and also it's also important to prepare the family in terms of action in advance so that they are ready to receive the children once back. Kat, what came out from your group? You are muted.
My mute flicked on again. So my group was looking at situation where children have been come across the border to other countries from institutional care, and they've had to register with the country of origin in their neighbouring countries. And then some of the local authorities in the country of origin have been liaising with the countries of asylum, essentially, to organise the return of children including into areas of ongoing conflict. So we're an agency that's working to provide care and protection for these children in the country of asylum. So we were saying that our group was discussing the need for concerted advocacy on different levels to ensure that the duty bearers involved are upholding the best interest of the child, that we're avoiding forcible return, and that we are advocating at different levels with authorities, but also with governments, and bringing in key actors like UNHCR and ICRC in that. And we just started to talk about the complexity of children returning to an active conflict zone, and whether and when that's ever in the child's best interest, but also return of children to institutional care, particularly if we're not aware of the situation for each child in the institutional care facilities. We obviously as a sector advocate against institutional care and have concerns about the neglect and the potential systems of abuse within care. So that all of those issues need to be taken into account. But sometimes the politics involved in these things can be an obstacle whether the authorities in the country of asylum, their diplomatic relations with the authorities in the country of origin. So I think, again, advocacy at different levels was the key sort of the key approach we would use, advocacy to uphold the best interests of children. Thank you. And lovely. Sorry.
Yeah. Over to Laurie now for the last group.
Thanks so much. So in our group, we were talking about adolescent boys who are moving illegally into a country and trying to avoid the formal child protection system so that they can continue their journey. And us as an agency are working in a country that requires mandatory reporting if we identify unaccompanied children. So we talked about what actions need to be taken. We talked about the fact that we need to be able to do best interest assessments, but then have parallel advocacy work, as the other groups mentioned, to prevent children from being detained and to actually be able to implement the findings from the best interest assessments. We also talked about supporting to have a variety of alternative care options available for these children. So because there was a risk of detention for these children and that they would be detained with adults. So we wanted to look at foster care options and we wanted to look at supported independent living for these children. And we also talked about creating safe spaces and drop-in centers that provide basic needs, but also allow for us to identify children. We talked quite a bit about the biggest obstacle we had is a bit of an ethical dilemma as an agency. So is it in the best interest of the child to support them to have a safe journey? But so maybe we give advice on how to have a safe journey, but then we are breaking mandatory reporting. Or is it in the best interest of the child to refer them to social services when we know that there's a high risk they'll be detained? And that many are trying to avoid the system. So we talked about the kind of ethical dilemma that comes with that. And one interesting example to overcome these obstacles, that's an example from SGBV, is that we, instead of providing services, we're providing advice. So seeing if that might be something we could explore. But essentially, we talked a lot about how this work would have to be done hand in hand with the authorities to be able to challenge some of those kind of existing policies and practices. I hope I've represented my group well. Thanks.
Thank you, Laurie. Now we'll go to the next slide and we'll hand it over to Kat.
Yeah, so we've had some really rich discussions today, and we've heard obviously from the US and from Ukraine. I just wanted to open it up to the plenary to get any ideas from people about what needs to happen next, and what, how do we address some of these complex issues more effectively? What needs to happen, who needs to be involved in that, recognizing that actually it's often a broader group of stakeholders than humanitarian child protection, and also what opportunities exist to take this forward. If anyone has ideas, please do put your hand up and come forward. Having said that, I can't see people, so you may have to come off mute, I'm afraid, and just talk.
Laura Shapi has raised her hand. Laura, please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Kat. I mean, there is a lot to say, and I think that the time is limited, but to me, it seems one of the main issues we are all struggling with is, while we appreciate and acknowledge the national authorities' role in defining what is the best interest of the child from in an individual manner on both sides of the border, it seems that we are still struggling as to what that means in terms of involving them in these processes. So for us as humanitarians to revisit how we go about that, how we approach, advocate with those national authorities, the type of support we are ready to provide, again, on both sides of an international border, for those authorities to be able to deliver against their mandate is something that would be worth investing in. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent. And Maria.
Yes, hi. So no, I was just reflecting, you know, on the bigger question linked with the type of guidance that is needed for the humanitarian workers, you know, around this question of case management, cross-border case management. And I do think that there is a need to work on a joint, you know, guidance. I just also think we need to be careful not to create a parallel, you know, mechanism, because a lot is very much linked with, you know, the basics and the standard that we've been trying to work on case management generally, I would say. So I think that, and I was reflecting with Lourdes the other day discussing about that, and I really think that, you know, thinking about including a specific chapter and attention when revising, you know, the coming guidance for child protection case management and humanitarian action, I think would be really relevant. And secondly, I also think, and I understand we're here to speak about specifically linked with humanitarian settings, but we all know that you know, children crossing borders happening not only linked with what we you know, detail as a humanitarian context. And I think that we also, I mean, it would be good to have that also in mind, right? About the kind of more, you know, migration flows that's going to go, and not always linked with huge emergencies, but linked also with, you know, severity and yeah, economic struggles and so on. So yeah, that's my take.
Thanks, Maria. I think there is a real opportunity there with the interagency guidelines, that revision, which is happening, starting soon and will go on for the rest of this year. What can we do to make sure that there is that chapter, and that chapter is as effective as possible in guiding the sector on this work? So that's a great point. Laura, sorry, I can probably pronounce your name wrong.
Thank you. It sounds like ravioli, so it's easier. So I would like to underline the psychological consequences on separation of the children from their family, and that with severe repercussion also on mental health care systems. So that goes from psychological suffering to very severe mental health disorder or behavioral disorder. And I think that this should be very, all these studies should be shared among the population and in governments, because they should know that what they do before has a consequences also on their later politics and economics issues. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate that link between mental health, psychosocial well-being, and just peace and reconstruction and so on. It is really important. Lourdes.
Just adding on what has been already said, but and now I lost a bit my thought, but I had an additional one when it was mentioned on the different alternative solutions. Some of those solutions do, besides, so one piece is quite important, which is the political buy-in and the advocacy on the CRC and on the, very basic on the non-refoulement and other actions. But then on the alternative pieces that we were discussing in the mandatory reporting group, for instance, it is also donors that, and it's much more expensive actually to do certain alternatives that are safer and that allow us to work in the best way. It has happened to us actually in the having, for instance, supported living options, which are more expensive and being shut down by donors saying that it was too expensive actually to provide an appropriate support. So I think that needs to be beared in mind too on some of those. So when we say who we involve, of course, is all the work with authorities and the ethical dilemma that we have within agencies, but it is also within actually the work that we do within even the project proposals that sometimes do not go through, even if we have the good solution. So at some point, there's also a piece of that. Of course, on all the case management support, we know that this cost efficiency piece is quite important because we know as it is, but it's not usually bought by also donors. It's more human resource intensive, and all this registration and all this individual case by case support is quite challenging still in cross-border and in certain settings where there is too much.
Thank you, Lourdes. And Jessica?
Sure. I mean, three quick thoughts that came to my head. The one was that I remember coming from an NGO background before I joined the UN and also working in development and then into emergencies. I found a difference in the sense that I found working in development that local NGOs had a much stronger somehow position or role and reception from local authorities in terms of their advocacy. Particularly in South Africa, where I started out my career, it was the local NGOs, the civil society, and those types of agencies that I found to be stronger allies for the international NGOs in really getting a message across. I'm not saying my experience is universal, but I have noticed that onwards. In emergencies, particularly in other humanitarian settings, I think that we've got to put our working groups to work. All these endless coordination forums that we are in, these clusters, sub-working groups, sub-task force of this working group, activity group of that. These are really the venues that we need to put them to work, and particularly the agencies in them that may have a stronger, for whatever reason, a stronger position or a stronger representation with authorities. I also think of the United Nations agencies that do have respective immunities and privileges when it comes to mandatory reporting and other types of things, that perhaps we can capitalize on them as members of our groups rather than sort of big UN agencies elsewhere. They are members in our group and we are on the same level when we are in these forums. So that was my second thought. And the last part was just that we really, that guidance is critical. And I think for humanitarian settings and settings that are including refugees, asylum seekers and returnees, and very selfishly coming from the information management for case management side, and Kath, I can see you saw this coming, we need to incorporate guidance on how we are sharing information cross-border, particularly when it is data transfers from the country of asylum, state authorities or state counterparts for children and families back to the country of origin, how that information might be transferred. When it comes to UN agencies, again, with that immunities and privileges, there's an ability to make data transfers in a safe, secure, and ethical way in the best interest of the child. Sometimes, perhaps, where it is not in the best interest of the child to share that information with the government in the country of origin. But what does this mean for NGOs, for local NGOs, for international NGOs who are often applying GDPR, which may not be recognized or relevant in the countries in which we operate? And the UN has a role to support, but also to enable. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Really appreciate that. And final comment from Justine.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kat. I think I just wanted to highlight the issue of children in institutions. I think with the crisis in Ukraine and overflowing into the other countries around Eastern Europe and other parts of Europe, we hadn't, in humanitarian child protection, we hadn't really interacted a lot with children in institutions. And this is one of the kind that we have to either learn from and prepare ourselves, and how do we really work with countries that have been having children in institutions and now have conflict. And definitely there wasn't preparation to say that we get children out or find a way to either work with our apply our usual standards of children, putting children into alternative care, working with children in families. Here we are working with children in institutions, and institutions being affected by conflict and being displaced across borders. And in this case, we don't have a clear guidance on how to work with such institutions, or even just be able to support the institutions to reduce risk. And even work with the government to be able to deinstitutionalize as soon as possible, so that it is easier for us. So I think it's high time that we, at this level, we think through how we are going to be able to work with institutions where we find them and they have to move, or children have to move because of either conflict or a disaster that has happened. How do we design standards? How do we design approaches that can be able to also work with children in systems that we are not clearly used to, especially when they have to move and cross borders? And how do we support the host countries to integrate these children within their system? Are we going to support them to integrate within the institutions that are existing there, or are we going to support the host countries to provide services based on alternative care, based on the basic, family-based care that we are used to? So I think I'm just highlighting that we are getting into scenarios that we are not used to at the humanitarian space. And yeah, as someone just mentioned, that we need to work with local authorities, local organizations, to learn from them how they've been doing it. But sometimes you realize that the way they've been doing it is not what we know that we should do, and we probably have to find a middle ground to work with this specific kind of children. And that also highlights emphasis on children with disabilities. And I think this situation also brings us to a very to a situation that we are not used to. I know within our case management guidelines and our case management standards, we have a way that is already clear that we work with children with disabilities. But in situations where children with disabilities have been put into institutions, and clearly families cannot be able to actually support the children with disabilities, even if they don't have, apparent, unique protection concerns other than being moved. But the fact that the families cannot take them on, and probably that is the reason they had put them into a boarding facility or something like that. How do we then work with them? Can we be able to learn from what is happening right now within Ukraine, and to also help the response now, and we prepare ourselves to respond better, but also prepare ourselves to respond to other scenarios that can come up that look like that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Justine. I think there's huge learning that we can take from Ukraine. I think that's an action that we need to carry forward and see what learning is being gathered and what more we can gather and how we can use that. So thank you, everybody. The Case Management Task Force and the Unaccompanied Separated Children's Task Force will come together look at, review the discussions and the suggestions, and make some suggestions to the Alliance about sort of next steps of what we can do to take this forward. And so if you have any other ideas, if you know of opportunities that we can link this work to, do get in touch, and we can see how we can take that forward. I can see that Lourdes has
the final comment, because we did mention it within the hexagon, but this is a wider audience, and I just saw Jessica has mentioned it, but having access to all the resources already existing, since we talk about guidance and procedures, would be good, just to ensure that on the practical level, a bit of harmonization, and there is a lot of existing. So
there is a lot of existing already. I agree. Yeah.
To put together what existing.
Thank you, Lourdes. Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your participation today. And thank you for the very rich discussions. Let me hand over. Who am I handing over to?
You're handing over to me, Kat.
Okay, great.
Now it's my turn. Jessica, I see you laughing. I'm glad I entertained you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much for your patience today. It has been great listening to everything and being in the session with all of you. I would like to just take a moment. Our second producer, Sam, will go ahead and place the closing poll as he just did in the chat. Please take a moment to open up those links and put in your entries, your answers. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just a closing poll. Please go ahead and fill those in. I would also like to let you know, as I look to my second screen, please note that we have a 15-minute break now. And you can find a networking space in the expo area from 11:30 to 12:15. Please note these times are in CET times. The next session, hot off the press, will begin at 1 p.m. CEST time, and we're looking forward to seeing you then. Again, please take a moment to fill in all of those links over there. We look forward to seeing you in the next session. Enjoy the break, have fun, and see you all very soon. A very, very big thank you to our speakers and our facilitators, and to all of you for sharing your time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm just going to jump in and say it's a little bit longer break than 15 minutes. I think you probably only have a 15-minute break because you've got to do all your other amazing background stuff. But for everyone else, it's a nice long break to be able to explore the expo, explore the agenda, and see which other sessions and things you might like to get involved with. Thanks so much, Kath, Jerry, and team. That was fantastic.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, Lourdes.
I'm just going to go ahead and start putting people in waiting rooms, as some people might have left.